All right, well, some massive news coming out on Tuesday afternoon. Patrick Kisnorbo is departing Melbourne Victory for a quote to pursue overseas opportunities. We've heard that one before, haven't we? Just 7 games in, Christian Montegan and Poletti into the A-League men's season for Melbourne Victory. He's had a pretty decent record, Christian, 5-1-1, but all of a sudden, heading up to one of the biggest games of the season, the home Christmas derby against your rivals, Paddy Kisnorbo is out of here.
I think the fans will feel pretty aggrieved, you have to say, because they gave Kisnorbo an opportunity because there was a bit of tension before he arrived. He already obviously coached Melbourne City to a championship. There was a bit of a rift there, and the fans sort of took him under his wing to say, okay, this is the new way forward. There was some great entertaining football being played, and all signs are pointing to, okay, Victory are a real championship contender this season. But just like that, all out the window. And when I saw the news, absolutely shocked. I saw Poletti's message in the group chat. I was just, absolutely shocked. I just didn't know what to make of it. Obviously, it's an overseas opportunity, as we'll touch on. But yeah, from a Victory point of view, right before a derby, it's just absolutely terrible timing. And you got to ask where to from here.
Yeah, so the first whispers out of the social media sphere, Sasha Pisani from the A-Leagues was here in Japan. That's kind of all we've heard so far on what a potential destination might be. Plady, this comes as a big shock. Patrick Kisnorbo, obviously he did very well at City, but he's gone away and had quite a tough time at Troyes. And then all of a sudden, 7 games into a new A-League season, someone overseas is willing to take another punt on him. It's quite surprising to me.
I legitimately couldn't believe it. My first reaction was to laugh, simply because we've seen this play out before with Tony Popovich several times in the history of the A-League. Like, another coach has pulled a Tony Popovich. This is just, it's just baffling to me that when you look at Patrick Kisnorbo, he's very much a plan A sort of coach and doesn't really have a plan B or plan C. It's always do plan A better. We saw throughout the A-League's All Access documentary series that aired a couple of years ago that it was very much like some memorable quotes stand out. It's just, I want more and more and more, referring to plan A. He doesn't have the know-how to sort of develop a plan B and a plan C. So another overseas club, nonetheless, willing to take such a punt on him with a 7-game sample size is quite confusing. We are going to talk about some shouts later, but Japan seems to have a fascination with Australian coaches at the moment. So maybe it's just he was an available coach, or his agent has made it clear that for the right club he would be available, and some Japanese club has taken a punt on him.
What's the point of signing a contract anymore? Like, 7 games in, you might as well just rock up and, okay, I'm just going to coach for this long. It's crazy.
Well, obviously, contracts can be negotiated by both sides. I'm assuming by the language of saying that, the Victory is saying, we're disappointed to see him depart. I'm assuming Patrick has included a clause that says if he gets a job offer overseas, he's allowed to leave. He doesn't have to barter his way out of a contract or anything like that. That's what I would assume. In the short term for Melbourne Victory, their current senior assistant coach, Arthur Dyers, will step in. Obviously, you appoint an interim from the inside that helps bring stability. In a massive week as well, you got to go up against Melbourne City. I wonder, Christian, how do you think Melbourne City fans are feeling right now? Because they're probably laughing, looking at their phones, their social media feed at the moment, saying, "Oh, okay, the old boss has gone into enemy territory. He's pretended to do well for a little while, and then he's jogged on, and suddenly they're in disarray with 4 days out for a derby."
Oh, they're definitely laughing because of, like what you just mentioned. You've got a rival coach. Kisnorbo was a saviour, right? Got them their maiden championship, moved to the arch rivals. A lot of City fans are really upset with Kisnorbo's decision. I think in the past, Kisnorbo even said that he wouldn't coach Victor or something along those lines. And then obviously events played out, and it is what it is. But I think they'd also be laughing because now Victoria bringing an interim coach, and okay, now it looks a lot more likely that City can really get a result from this derby. We saw in round 2 or 3 this season, the first derby fixture, Victory were pretty dominant, especially in that first half. But you can be a new coaching bounce as well. I guess you can look at it from that lens if you're a Victory supporter. If you want to find a bit of optimism in this news, but at the same time, it must ruffle a bit of feathers to lose such a top coach and someone who was meant to lead Victory down this new project, and now to have that sort of ripped up and go back to square one, it is going to take a bit of time now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm probably of the opinion that I don't actually see it having too much of an effect this week because their plans are so well set. This team has been very consistent. I feel like the game plan, as Poletti said, is not going to change that much, right? So in terms of going into the game on Saturday night, I don't think there's going to be too much effect apart from maybe just a little more noise around it. But it's the couple of months and the year down the road where they thought they were on this longer term journey with Patrick Kisnorbo. Now they're going to have to go down that route with someone else. And, let's have a little think about what some of those options may be. Some of the Australian names doing the rounds at the moment. Peter Klamoski and Arthur Pappas. Klamoski, we talked about last week on the podcast, has just signed on as the Malaysian national team head coach, and Arthur Pappas is set to be announced very shortly for Cerezo Osaka in J1 as well. So those two options are off the table. We had Mark Milligan was talked a lot about at the start of the season, or the end of last season when the Patrick Kisnorbo ended up being appointed. There were some other names in there as well. Ross Aloisi is currently Kevin Muscat's assistant over at Shanghai Port. There's lots of variables to play out there. If Kevin Muscat goes away to Europe, is a more stable A-League option like the Victory enough to bring him back and entice him into the A-League rather than Brisbane Roar? And the other name I want to throw out is John Hutchinson as well. He's the interim boss or former interim boss at Yokohama F. Marinos. He was the assistant to Harry Kuehl when Harry Kuehl stepped away. He carried out the season, and now that season is over in J1. He is stepping down from that role. So there are a couple of names that I think would probably be high on the list. Poletti, do you have a particular favourite in there?
I mean, out of those names you suggested, I think for me, I like the idea of Ross Aloisi. I think we saw the what's the term I'm looking for here? We saw the blueprint of what sort of coach he was at Brisbane Roar, and if it was a different club, I think that blueprint might have started to work. But we also never really got to see it play out over the course of a whole season. So I think that would be interesting. The problem with that, and the problem with any of these coaches on this list, is that we might not get to see their full array of what they can do because they're coming into someone else's team, essentially. And that's quite often the problem.
But it's a very good team, though.
It is a very good team, but we see this quite often where coaches will come in, particularly in the A-League, where a lot of players are on 1 year, 2 year contracts, mutual terminations, all of that. They have mass clear-outs over the winter break. I'm not saying that would be a similar situation here with Aloisi, but we might not get to see him play out to his full potential if that makes sense.
We talked about this at the start of the season, Christian, and I think it still holds true now, is that I don't believe that Victory will wait too long at all to get someone permanent in, because this is the season where they need to be challenging for silverware. So it's not like you're going to let an interim sit for too long. You want someone in and give them as much runway as possible coming in. And again, this is the same with Kisnorbo, a very good squad. You don't often get to come into a new team as a manager with a squad that is set up for success like Melbourne Victory's is. So they're going to want someone to come in and just have as many rounds left on the regular season as possible to get them ready for finals so they can contend.
Yeah, definitely. We've been talking about it in past episodes of the podcast where this is Victory's time to really capitalise, right? It's those teams like the Sydney, Aucklands. I mean, if they don't take this opportunity in this window in the next couple of seasons, then it might be a missed opportunity for them. So I think they're definitely seeing it from that lens. They'll have to bring in a coach for the long term. Those names that you mentioned, probably the two that I'd go for would be either Ross or Mark Milligan. Like Poletti mentioned with Ross's time at Brisbane, I really liked what he did there in terms of the identity that he brought to Brisbane. And that's a Brisbane side with a lot of flaws behind the scenes, right? I mean, they were focusing a lot on youth, but you can see the patterns of play and the way they wanted to move the ball forward. You can see the ideas were coming together. He would just obviously wasn't there for long enough to implement them and to see those ideas grow into something bigger. And I think you come into a Victory side with incredible foundations, much bigger than Brisbane, much more potential, already a championship contender, unlike Brisbane. You set yourself up really well. And if you're Ross, you're thinking, okay, this is a massive opportunity for me to really, again, kickstart my career, because he hasn't really. I mean, he's coached Brisbane. He's been assistant at Shanghai Port with Kevin Muscat. So that, again, has been another learning curve for him. But I think for him now, the next step in his coaching career is taking a club like a Victory and having those tools available to him so that he can perhaps win a championship in the next year or two. And then from there, assuming that his aspirations would be to go overseas again and to get another club and then progress from there. And then, Mark Milligan is the other one for me because he knows the club inside out, former captain, former championship winner there. I think he'd make a lot of sense as well. Only downside would be the experience factor behind him. Does he have the medal required to tackle such a big job? You didn't mention, I don't think, but Harry Kewell is another name. But for me personally, I wouldn't go for him because his record just doesn't stack up well for a club of the size of Victory. So, those are probably the two names I'd go for.
All right. I think that'll just about do us. Any other wild tips from you, Poletti?
I've got a couple of suggestions that I like as a potential coach. One of them would just be a hilarious PK League moment. But so two coaches I like. I very much like Nick Cushing from New York City. I think that we know.
Who?
Okay, no. So he got fired from New York City earlier this year. We know that Victory have gone to a former City Football Group coach before in Patrick Kisnorbo. Cushing spent 7 years as the coach of Manchester City Women. I think given the similarities between the MLS and the A-League, that could be worth a shout, because I do believe that Cushing is a lot better than what City's record suggested this season.
Is he American? Who is he?
I believe he is English off the top of my head. He is an English coach.
Does he have any links to Australia?
No, I'm throwing a wild card out here. Okay. I think that's
a serious wild card.
I did say it could be a wild card. Another coach I like is Bob Bradley, former LAFC coach. Won the Supporters Shield with them in 2019, MLS Cup in 1998 with Chicago Fire, as well as the US Open Cup in 98 and 2000. He got LAFC to the final of CONCACAF Champions League, which is no easy feat for MLS sides to actually make the final of that tournament, given the comparative resources to the Mexican teams. He's just come off his second stint at Stabæk, I think it is, in Norway, so he's definitely available. And then the third option I want to suggest, which is, I'm surprised you didn't come up with this one, Lockie, as well, because it is an Australian coach. He has experience winning trophies at big clubs. Graham Arnold has the chance to do the funniest thing ever.
That's actually not. That's your best one out of the three for sure. I wonder if he's ready.
You don't follow MLS.
Fair enough. But my point was more like, if you wanted to go that route, there's thousands of names you could bring up from all around the world. Anyway, Graham Arnold, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought about him because there were rumors that he was, like, his agent was offering him up to some Scottish clubs, right? So if it is now the point in time where he would want to come back into management, then I think actually you're not wrong that Christian Arnold probably could be a reasonable possibility.
It could be, but just looking at his history with Sydney, I just can't. I don't know.
He said the same thing about Kisnorbo.
I know. I don't know. It wouldn't sit well, I reckon, with a lot of Victory fans. I know we've said that as well with Kisnorbo, but I mean, I think he'd want a bit more of a rest. I mean, does he really want to get back into the fold? Does he want to take a bit more of a sabbatical leave? Maybe time will tell. But we've sort of pinned it down to Australian potential managers. It could be an overseas candidate. Victory have had, I think, 4 foreign coaches in their time, Merrick being one of them, and a couple of others. So, I mean, they don't tend to usually go down that route unless it's an interim sort of option. But that could be another potential possibility. If those Australian candidates, if none of them work, then they've got to turn to someone, right? It can't be this interim situation for the whole season. They could, but it wouldn't make sense.
All right, fascinating. We'll leave it there for now. Crazy news just to drop randomly on a Tuesday afternoon. It's going to lead into a big derby, and we'll see you all on Friday to break it down on the podcast.